Hello and welcome to Where You Lead, a podcast where we, a real-life mother and daughter duo, rewatch Gilmore Girls and discuss the misadventures of fictional mother and daughter duo Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I am Tessa Dare, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Karanzan Chronicles and Beth's daughter.
And I'm Beth, Tessa's mom. I'm also a writer. We're going to give you a little bit of background on how we got to this point today. We used to watch the Gilmore Girls religiously when Tess was Rory's age, and I was just a little bit older than Lorelai. Tessa's friends in school used to compare us to the Gilmores because I was a single mom, and Tess went to a private prep school that we could not afford. Mm-hmm. We have always had long and analytical conversations about movies and TV, music, politics, and culture. When Tess moved to Seattle, we continued these talks over the phone. Sometimes they went pretty long, and by long I mean over an hour. One day it occurred to us that we should move these discussions over to the digital world, maybe even into a podcast. And the Gilmore Girls felt like a good place to start. So here we are.
Yeah. So every week we will start off with a synopsis of the episode along with the date it aired before heading into our discussion. I am currently not actually drinking coffee. I am drinking sparkling grapefruit ginger yerba mate, which is caffeinated. Another quick note about this episode is that today in Seattle, where I am located, the Blue Angels are practicing for Seafair. So we're going to do our best to edit those sounds out of the show. I apologize if we don't do a perfect job of it. But yeah, so I'm drinking yerba mate. It's a bastardization of traditional yerba mate, but it is quite delicious and caffeinated.
It sounds absolutely disgusting to me, so... I mean, and I said it when I laughed. I was going to pull back from the microphone because I have a loud laugh. But I'm a pretty basic coffee drinker. It's coffee and cream for me. So I don't put anything else into it. But I've had enough coffee today because in St. Louis it's actually a little bit later than it is in Seattle. So I've had enough coffee. I'm just on the water now, and we don't have any loud noises right now in St. Louis. However, I do have a dog in the background, and occasionally she does bark. Her name is Abby, and if she barks, we'll just give her credit. Anyway, today we are discussing episode 5 from season 1, titled Cinnamon's Wake. It originally aired November 2nd, 2000, and Tess will give you a synopsis.
Yeah, this one, I do feel like this episode is a little bit harder to do an overview of than some of the others, just because it's kind of there's not one B plot. There's like a bunch of tiny little plots. This is, I don't know if this should be our official term for this, but this is one of the setting up the town characters episodes. It's a town episode. So the primary overview is basically that the Rory and Dean plot is kind of heating up a little bit, as is Lorelai and Max. And then the big incident of the episode is that Rory and Lorelai's neighbors, Babette and Maury, their cat Cinnamon, dies, and they have a wake for her. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the overview.
That's the overview. And you make a good point, too, about they do seem to have different kinds of episodes. This is a town episode. Sometimes it's a school episode where everything's going on at school. There was that one episode when they went golfing. That was more of a family, grandparents' family episode. So yeah, they do that. We did get to see a lot of townspeople in this one. However, there were also a lot of townspeople that we'll never see again. It's like they're just shots of them in the crowd. And it's like, who are these people? We never see them again. But anyway,
I think this is the first episode where we get Kirk's name as Kirk said out loud.
That is very good, yes.
But yeah, the show in general is a very big ensemble cast, which I think is the size of this particular ensemble cast is kind of unusual, especially for television at the town. They did a pretty good job at keeping the minor characters consistent. for a lot of the series.
With the notable exception of Kirk. And he's kind of an interesting character because I almost feel like the writers are like, well, we need somebody to do different things and be a certain kind of character. And then after this actor, I guess, had appeared, and I'd like to get their take on this, actually. After he had appeared in several episodes, they probably realized we could keep doing this with him. We can give him a real name, and he stays that character, but he does a different thing in every episode, or in every episode that he's in, and he does. Yeah. Throughout the series, he has a different career,
he's kind
of
a different job.
Yeah. He does everything. Anytime they have a need to fill, they put Kirk in there.
So let's get into the specifics of the episode. We start with a cold open over at the grandparents' house. However, Richard is away on business, and Emily tells Lorelai that her cousin Claudia has died. Lorelai has no idea who that is, and Emily explains that she's, Richard's grandmother's sister's
daughter. Yeah, and there's a couple things in this scene, too. Don't forget the Nazi stuff. So,
yes.
One of the funniest jokes they've ever had. The thing about it's a father's grandmother's it's Richard's grandmother's sister's girl. You're right, and she says it like that. She says girl, and I related to this because I have a family full of lots of these kinds of connections. And in fact, just this week on Facebook, one of my distant relatives who lives in Mississippi showed up, and I'm not Facebook friends with her, but I was with her grandmother, who was my mother's cousin. But she died about a year ago, her grandmother, my mother's cousin. So she said something about her. She's been gone a year. She was just kind of celebrating her life in a post, but it showed up for me. And so I introduced myself, and I said, you don't know me, my name may not seem familiar, but your grandmother was my mother's cousin. And then we had a little bit of a conversation about what the other connections were. I said, your great-grandmother is somebody I'm named for. That's because my mom loved her so much. And she was like, she just, so anyway, I'm pointing this out because I have these kinds of connections. So when she's describing it, I'm like, oh my God, this is so familiar to me. So.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway. But Lorelai is completely uninterested in going to the funeral. Emily's basically trying to get Lorelai to go to the funeral. And Lorelai says, not this time. And Emily responds, I don't think Claudia's planning to die a second time.
Die again. Yeah.
And then we get the unexpectedly very funny Nazi joke. Which is...
It is very funny. So, but the background leading up to it is that he's in Germany.
Oh, yes, Richard's in Germany.
She doesn't want... Richard's in Germany. She, I guess, says he's away on business, and Lorelai says, well, where? And she says he's in Germany, and he says, well, I didn't realize he had Nazi friends. Oh, and she said, yeah, your father's insuring Nazis now. I mean, there's this whole, discussion about this, and you can have business in Germany, and it's not necessarily with Nazis. But then there's a funny joke at the end. You want to tell it, the Rudolph Gottfried joke?
I don't think I wrote all of it down.
But the context is that there's this constant competition between Lorelai and her mother over who can get the other one, who can catch the other one in a not understanding that something is a joke. Who is
Although
wittier,
I do feel
who
like
is smarter.
Up until now, it has mostly been Lorelai doing it,
which
is part of what the joke is basically Emily showing Lorelai up in a moment when Lorelai does not expect it at all.
No, she did, and Lorelai, it's like she really does not get sometimes how smart and funny her mother is.
Totally.
But she pulls a joke on her and says something about
it does. Oh, yes, we do actually have some Nazi friends. I don't remember if she says a name, but she says, nice old man, interesting stories. And Lorelai says, Mom, you hung out with Nazis? That's hideous, or something. And Emily goes, no, Lorelai, that was a joke.
Yes. Rudolph Gottfried is the friend.
That's what they said. Okay, yeah.
And
Emily
that's what I have written down.
Emily has just great deadpan delivery.
It sounds serious. We don't realize it's a joke and then after that, Rory cracks up.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like...
Rory's
And
loving
Lorelai,
it,
yeah, she loves it. And Lorelai looks at her like with this "you are a traitor" look. And anyway, and then we cut to the credits.
Well, and I do think part of the joke is also that, like, it maybe is a little, it maybe is a little bit believable that because they're such an old moneyed family, maybe they would know Nazis. And then Emily just sort of says it so casually, like, oh yeah, we did know Nazis. A nice old man, interesting stories. Like, it's just like nonchalant. And it's that nonchalance that Lorelai does to Emily all the time that lulls Lorelai into this sense of this sort of false comfort that this is real. And then Emily's like, no, of course it's a joke. Of course we don't know Nazis.
That's a joke. I did write down here really quick that once again, I love the opening credits. You know, it's interesting. Whenever I see opening credits in a TV show, I always think about if it's in the first season, they had to have filmed quite a few episodes before they created the credits because they're taking scenes from the show. And in fact, by the time of this episode, and this is number 5, I think we have seen every one of the episodes that are in the credits, except maybe one or two. There are a couple of shots that are not.
I'm pretty sure the next episode has some of them, because there's like one shot in particular that I know comes from the next episode.
And one was in this one. It's the one where Lane is dancing, and
Skanking.
The snippets that they choose are just great, and I just really love the opening credits of this show. And I always watch them. There are some shows that I never, you watch it once or twice and then you skip through it, which we can do now. You couldn't do when it was live, but when we're recording it, or if you're watching it on streaming, you can skip through the credits. And I never do with this show. I see something new every time, and plus I love the song. It's Carole King, so
then the next scene after the credits is in fact the scene where Lane is skanking in Rory's room. Skanking is a kind of dance.
Skanking?
Skanking, yeah, that's what it's called.
How do you spell that? S-K?
Yeah, I think it's SKANKING. I'm not an expert on it, but that's Lorelai actually calls it out. She mentions that Lane is skanking, and that I think it was pretty big during ska. I think it's like the dance that goes with like ska music.
So, but it looks like she's punching.
Yeah, it's kind of like a punchy-kicky dance.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's very athletic.
I think it was like it's like not exactly a mosh pit dance, but like close to that.
Oh wow, okay.
But yeah, so that's the one thing that's happening in this scene is that Lane is hanging out in Rory's room, listening to loud music and skanking, and meanwhile Rory and Lorelai are in the kitchen, and Rory is telling Lorelai that the Chilton bake sale is today, which Lorelai already knows and says she's on top of, but Rory doesn't quite believe her because her mom is not really a baker, which of course I'm pretty sure even when we first saw this, I was immediately like, well, yeah, she's gonna get Suki to do it.
Well, and so that's an interesting thing because in this scene, I think Lorelai has screwed up enough times. Yeah. And we know she's organized and competent and all of those things, but she has messed up just enough times and been late and then the whole missing the exam last time that we are with Rory in the moment being worried about this and how she reminds her, you got to do this. It's expected. Everybody does it, and it's not like she's going to get in trouble if Lorelai doesn't do it, but it's going to be embarrassing if she doesn't. Everybody does this, Mom. And Lorelai's like, I got this. And what she didn't say, and what we realized when we get to that scene was, of course she's got this. She has a full-time baker in her employ. So, this is the one thing she will have is the food part. So...
I did just want to point out, so they reveal that Lane is in the room, and Lorelai asks her...
Which Lorelai doesn't know. Yeah. She has no idea...
And so Lorelai asks her, what does your mom think you're doing right now? And Lane responds, contemplating the reunification of the two Koreas.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know how common that is for actual expat Korean immigrants to do, but I will say I watched a South Korean rom-com TV show called Crash Landing on You. It's very fun, very cute, and literally the plot of it is this well-to-do businesswoman who's launching her own like sportswear and her fashion brand decides to be the model in her own fashion shoot, which involves like parachuting. and there's like a freak tornado when she's like parachuting
Oh
in
my
her
God.
own sportswear, and she gets blown over into North Korea.
Oh,
and like
no.
this romantic comedy show is about this South Korean woman trapped in North Korea, slowly falling in love with like one of the captains of the guard there. But it was just really interesting to me because there are like multiple characters in the show who wholeheartedly believe that the reunification of the two Koreas will happen in their lifetimes. Like this is a prevalent part of the plot.
Is this a TV show or a movie?
It's a TV show.
Okay.
There are a number of South Korean TV shows that are like a limited run, so it does have like an end. It's not like a forever show.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, cute show, and that line made me think of it a lot.
Well, what it made me think of was your prep school that you went to.
Yes.
Had a lot of international students, and 95% of them were South Korean.
True.
So did they never talk about this at school?
They did not specifically talk about the reunification of the two Koreas. No. I mean, I know there was a lot of South Korea also has mandatory military service. We did talk a little bit about that because I knew students who were literally going to go straight into the military for 2 years before starting school, or
before
they had
college,
planned, or they had it deferred until right after college. So no, they did not talk about the reunification of the two Koreas, though. I think, and I don't think Lane is seriously contemplating it either. That's the line she fed her mom.
But you know what? She has some great lines about her Korean mother. It's hilarious.
All right, so then the next scene, they go outside to go to school, and Babette and Maury are walking their cat Cinnamon in this adorable little wagon that they've made for her. And that's just sort of a brief scene, just kind of reminding us that these two have this cat, Cinnamon.
And there's something wrong with the cat too. It's like she's not having a good day. There's something, she's a little under the weather, and it's foreshadowing. We know what the title of the episode is, and we know that Claudia has died. So
yeah.
And that there's a funeral component to this episode.
There's like a covered part of the wagon for when Cinnamon needs her private time. And then Rory goes to the bus stop, and Dean sees her and follows her onto the bus. And
okay, but before that, here's my question about her and the bus. Inconsistent. So this time she has a small backpack. The last time we saw her get on the bus, she had a backpack, a bag, and a big duffel bag. Where did all that stuff go?
Well, I can invent a reason, which is that maybe all the extra stuff was all of the catch-up stuff, and now she's caught up. But no, it's inconsistent. Yeah. There is no explanation given. I assume it was just a one-time sight gag that would be too unwieldy to repeat too many times.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But so Dean starts teasing her and saying, "Oh, you're always so serious," and they have a little flirtatious scene here.
Yes.
And then then she says, "You have to get off the bus. You got to go to school." And then he reminds her that it is a bus. So, and buses make stops.
Yes. Yeah, it actually starts with him accidentally scaring the crap out of her because she doesn't notice him because once again she's got her nose in a book and is completely unaware of the world. So he sits down behind her and leans over and she yells. She's totally unprepared. And then she's super uncomfortable and awkward the whole time.
And did you notice that neither one of them paid a fee to get on the bus?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just she might have a card.
I think she waived something, but Dean just popped on.
He just popped on but yeah, I mean, neither one of them paid their fare, so just pointing that out. Sure. Little things like that.
But then he hops off, and then we go to the inn.
This is a great scene. I love this scene.
This is a good little Michel scene. So a group of French people enter the inn, and they hear Michel speaking on the phone. He's speaking in English, but clearly has an accent. So one of the French dudes asks him something in French, and he immediately pretends that he does not speak French and that he's just a simple boy from Texas.
I get the impression, though, that she told the French people when they made the reservation that she had a French-speaking employee.
Mm-hmm. But she pulls him over and says that. She's like, I told them.
Yeah. And he has a great line. He says, "Fine, I shall be French, but I shall not be happy." So
yeah. Well, even before that, he says, she tells him that he needs to entertain the French people, and he says, Lorelai, I don't know how many French people you've met over the years, but most of them are insufferable. That is why I left France.
And Michel is insufferable. And
Yes.
so he knows what he's talking about.
And I had the captions on when he goes over, so I figured out a little bit of what they said. He basically goes over and tells them that he was joking when he was pretending he couldn't speak English, and they respond with, "Oh, you're so droll."
So droll, yes.
And he turns back to Lorelai and says, "Kill me now."
Oh, but before that, they do the double kiss. So, the
yes.
French double kiss thing.
kiss.
And then he says, "Kill me now." Yes. It's a great scene.
It's very Michel.
It's almost like they write specific scenes just to see how much laughter they can get out of the audience from Michel. He's a specific kind of character. He's a great foil, and I think they write specific scenes for him. So this is great.
I mean, I guess it is an inn, so it does make sense that they would occasionally have foreign tourists. But yeah, this definitely feels like a scene specifically written to show off Michel.
I shall be French, but I shall not be happy.
So the next scene is the bake sale, and Lorelai has recruited Suki, so we get a shot of their table at the bake sale, and it looks fantastic. Just like
it's not just
cakes.
one item. She didn't just make brownies like most of the moms. They have a whole table of gourmet items. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Gourmet, beautifully decorated. And of course, Suki has
torch. Yep.
A torch, and she makes some sort of comment about how Rory can't hold the torch because professionals need to do it, and then she immediately proceeds to set the table on fire because of course she does.
Fortunately, Lorelai is able to put out, because I'm as soon as she sets it on fire, I'm thinking, oh my god, the whole thing's gonna go up in flames. Mm-hmm. But there's lemonade right in the next table, and she gets a lemonade and throws it on there, and
Lorelai's very quick thinking in that moment and puts it out, and then Max Medina comes over to speak to her, and Lorelai is immediately clearly a little uncomfortable. She sort of overemphasizes calling him Mr. Medina instead of Max.
She walks him pretty far away from the table, too.
Yeah,
before they can start talking. She walks him to another part of the campus.
Yeah, he gets her to agree to go for a walk, and she takes the torch so that Suki cannot light the table on fire.
Yes. Yes, she does.
And then they walk away. And Mr. Medina says that she's being icy, but she responds that she's being wintry. And he kind of apologizes for what happened in the last episode. If anyone doesn't remember, is Rory was late for the test and he wouldn't let her take it. But he says that he would do it again.
I think Lorelai's moved on from that. I think she's icy to him in this scene because she knows what's coming. She knows he's going to ask her out. She knows the signals. She's had a lot of experience with men, and she feels that she knows she's trying to get him to stop because she doesn't know what to do about it. She knows what he wants to do, that he wants to ask her out. She doesn't know how to handle that. And honestly, she's right. I'm getting ahead here, but I was troubled by this whole situation, and I'm still troubled by it. But go ahead.
It's definitely awkward. He does try to get her to agree to a date, and she eventually pretty reluctantly agrees to a quote-unquote lower commitment coffee date, which the way they do it is lower commitment, but I feel like this is a regular thing, and it sort of baffles me a little bit, this idea that like going out for coffee is automatically lower commitment than going out for dinner. I guess it's a lower money commitment, but like you can definitely end up hanging out at a coffee date just as long as you can at a dinner date.
You can, but there's no alcohol involved.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's usually daytime, so you can go home afterwards if it doesn't work out. It is a lower key kind of situation where you can get comfortable with each other, but it's not for the reason they're doing it. She wants the coffee date because she's not sure about dating. Most people, most women, I think, who want the coffee date first are just not sure about the person. I mean, it's an easier way to segue, I guess, into a dating experience where you're not, where there's not wine involved and there's not, an evening where you finish the date at the end of the night. So this is in the middle of the day. But I want to back up just a second here and because I love the jokes. I love her witticisms. When he says, does she drink coffee? She says or does she consume coffee? I think he says consume coffee, and because they're being they're being sarcastic with each other. She says, only with my oxygen.
Yes.
So, and because there's a running coffee gag in this. So, and actually that's another reason why their first date in a coffee shop kind of fits well with the organization of the show, because coffee's a big thing for her.
And she does, like, set it up in such a way that it's basically, like, literally she's not going to go out of her way. She tells him where to find her, where she will be anyway.
Yes.
Like, she always goes to this coffee place after class.
Yeah. She's really worried about the ethics of this. And he's not. And as a teacher, he really should be. And I realize this is pre-Me Too. But there's all kinds of ethical considerations here. Well, and aside from that, there's the family part. You know, Lorelai doesn't want to betray her daughter. This is her teacher. What if she becomes? What if this guy becomes one of Rory's favorite teachers, and her mom is dating him? There's just, what if she hates him?
I do want to talk about the scene where Lorelai and Suki talk about it, because we kind of get more into the reasoning there, and I think it makes a lot of sense, but we're not quite at that scene yet. Before that, we've got a conversation between Lane and Rory, which I don't know. Well, so I guess apparently Rory has asked Lane what city she would live in if she could live anywhere in the world, and Lane says Philadelphia because that's where M. Night Shyamalan lives, which I have to assume that this is like right after The Sixth Sense and before all of the not great ones that he made.
It's right about that time. The Sixth Sense was just made, But you know, again, this is their way of showing that these Lane and Rory and Lorelai are all into music and movies. They're really into pop culture. And
although Rory thinks Lane's answer is terrible, she does not understand why, if you could live anywhere in the world, you would choose Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, I agree with that.
And then they pass Babette and Maury, which is when we see that the cat is really not doing that great. They say he's dyspeptic, which I looked up dyspeptic because I wasn't sure what the literal definition is, and here's what the internet will tell you. It is an adjective of or having indigestion or consequent irritability or depression. So it sort of sounds like either you have stomach issues or you have emotional issues.
I'm guessing the cat was throwing up and
it's definitely digestion. They say they think it's because he ate some of the clams at Al's Pancake World. I think we mentioned this before, but there's an ongoing joke about how Al's Pancake World is like the other restaurant in town, and it's called that, but it doesn't actually, or maybe it does serve pancakes, but it also just serves all kinds of random food. And
including
a
clams.
lot of it is not good. And then at the end of the scene, Rory sees that Dean is working, and she does this very awkward move to try to blow off Lane so that she can go like awkwardly spy on him. And I do get that like the whole thread this episode is that like Rory straight up has no idea how to deal with the fact that she likes Dean. Like, just every single scene, she's being super awkward. But I do not understand why she can't just tell Lane, like, hey, I want to go look at this boy that I like, and I need to do it alone. Also, if it were me, like, I remember being a teenager and, like, liking someone, you actually do usually want your friend to come with you, because then the two of you, like, giggle together, and then, like, you come up with, like, a scheme together. I don't understand why she tries to get Lane to go away instead of...
I think I do. I think Rory is a perfectionist, and she wants to be better with Dean, but she keeps screwing up with him. She sees it as script. She's awkward. She stumbles, and she doesn't want to stumble in front of her friend Lane and then be made fun of. I think that would be
Yes.
That's what I would be worried about.
I don't think Lane would make fun of her, though. Like, Lane doesn't know how to deal with boys either.
I know, but the whole situation for Rory is just really... I'm a lot like Rory. I was like her as a teenager, and very awkward and worried about that awkwardness. And I don't think you quite had that level of awkwardness. So maybe I completely get why she didn't want Lane to go with her. Not yet. Maybe at some point in the future, but she wasn't ready. She's just too shy, and she's afraid of stumbling, and she doesn't want to stumble in front of anybody else. And anyway, so she goes and talks to Dean.
I don't think it's really about how awkward I was. I think it's just that, like, me and my best friend at that time were very codependent, and, like, definitely... either of us would have just like grabbed on to the other and like we would have just done it together. Like,
so you would have told her that there was a boy.
Yeah,
See, Rory hasn't even told Lane that there's a boy. That was me.
But
I
Lane
wouldn't tell
is
anybody.
a little bit aware because Dean asked Lane about Rory. So Lane is a little bit aware of what's happening. But yeah, like I definitely, like my best friend would know and I would know who she had a crush on and we would probably try to find ways to talk to them together and then most likely giggle in a really high-pitched way and then run away awkwardly together.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. But that's not who Rory is. She's very different. But what's interesting to me about this, she does go on to talk to him, but I think we talked about this a couple days ago, but there are 3 or 4 places in this episode where there's overt sexual dialogue going on. And it's a little unusual. I mean, I think, maybe I'm misremembering the Gilmore Girls because I haven't seen it in 20 years. But
we're talking about Miss Patty?
Not just her. But I mean, the show as a whole doesn't tend to make a lot of sexual innuendos in the dialogue. There aren't a lot of those. There are 4 at least 4 in this episode. Yeah. So I was kind of surprised at that. There's a lot of sex in this episode is what I keep. So first,
there's not a lot of literal sex. There's a lot of alluding
sexual,
to sex.
Sexual language. I mean, first it was Babette when they first see her with what's his name, Maury and the cat. Every time we see Babette, she says something about him, and and it always has a sexual undertone to it. I don't remember what she said in this particular, but that was number 1. And then the second one is in the little shop, the little grocery store, where
Miss Patty immediately knows what Rory's doing.
Yeah, and she says the plums, and she talks to Rory and tries to get her to eat a plum, and she said these plums are better than sex.
Yeah, and
so that's number 2. And then as we move further along, I'll point the other ones out. But that, I mean. Yeah. Babette and Miss Patty are both very sensual people, and they don't hesitate to talk about that a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's not surprising. But the other 2 that come up later in the episode are. So we'll talk about when we get to them. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is definitely an episode where all of the women in town are kind of horny, except for Suki, who appears to not get it at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, we get a little interaction with Rory and Miss Patty where Rory's being really weird in the aisles and Miss Patty notices, tries to tell her about the plums, and then is like, well, what are you up to? And then sees Dean and is like, oh, I see what you're doing. And then Rory's like, no, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And Miss Patty's like, don't tell anyone what? And she's like, don't tell anyone that I was not here. And like runs away again.
She does understand young people very well.
Yes, yeah. As far as I can tell, in this one instance, Miss Patty does use her discretion and does not out Rory at all. But then Kirk comes up to her because Miss Patty has been standing in the grocery store and just like eating stuff. And Kirk comes up to her and gets really mad and like tells her that if she puts another thing in her mouth that does not belong there, that he will call the police. And she's pretty offended, and we will conclude that little thing later. It'll come up later.
But she does flirt with him.
She does,
She's a little flirtatious with him, but she's flirtatious with everybody.
Yeah, she's flirtatious with everybody. But yeah, she is flirtatious with him. And then we get Rory finally trying to check out with the lettuce, but apparently she came into the store with only $1, so she isn't able to also buy the random mousetrap that she grabbed. And Dean tries valiantly to engage her in some flirtatious dialogue, and she just does not know what to do with it and basically runs out of the store.
She runs into the store to see him, but then can't deal with it.
Yep.
She just is so self-conscious. I don't even know how to describe it. So awkward.
That she can't do it. It's very teenagery. It's very teenagery.
Teenage. Yeah.
All right, so the next scene is Lorelai and Max meeting up at the coffee shop. They engage in some more banter. It's sort of like a cute off/chess match where he is trying to convince her that it will be okay for them to date.
We should date because we want to. And she says, well, I want to be a Bengal.
Yes.
And he says, and her other is, well, I'm attracted to pie. She loves pie references. She uses pie references all the time.
True, although I don't know if I would call it being attracted to pie, but to each their own. And then Max basically seals the deal with this smooth, like, sad story about his uncle who didn't ask out the girl he liked and then got, like, enlisted into the army and then came back and she had moved away. And it very much feels like a practiced move to me, mainly because he does this very subtle, like, arm touch thing in the middle where I was just like, oh yeah, smooth, dude. Smooth.
Well, he is an English teacher.
True.
And they are pretty smooth, and she keeps outwitting him a lot. But there's a point at which the waitress, and this was actually a really good scene. The waitress comes up and asks him if they need anything, and at this point he's a little overwhelmed by Lorelai, and he looks at the waitress and says, "Got any hemlock back there?"
Hemlock, that was it.
Yeah, and the waitress actually gets it and laughs because she's been listening to this dialogue, I guess, and walks off. And usually, a lot of times with people who show up on screen like that for just a couple of seconds, they don't get that kind of involvement in the scene. You can see when she laughs that she's been listening to them and laughs and gets the joke.
But yeah, and he kind of wins her over with the story. She does finally agree to
which we're not convinced is true. Because she asked him, is that a true story?
He doesn't answer.
He doesn't answer, no.
My main other comment on this scene is just that this is a classic empty coffee cup scene.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get me started. Clear that all of these coffee cups are empty.
Always. And that's a great thing to bring up when you're talking about a TV show. Okay, so in this case, they have paper cups. Now, usually in the Gilmore Girls, they have mugs. Television shows are notorious. They give them empty coffee cups. And the thing is, when you're drinking out of a cup that actually has fluid in it, it's got heft to it. And, you hold it differently. But when you have an empty coffee cup in your hand, you're going to bring it up to your face faster. You're going to, I mean, it's obvious that actors, it's been 20 years since the Gilmore Girls, and TV shows are still doing this. Why have they not figured out, even if you're not going to give your actor coffee, put some damn water in that cup.
Water in it, yeah.
Give it some heft, put some milk in it.
Water with some food coloring. Yeah, I mean, I understand why they can't give them coffee, because if you have to do 20 takes of that, you're going to end up drinking a ton of caffeine, and that's just not a fair thing to put.
Same with alcohol. They can't give them alcohol in scenes either, but and that makes a lot of sense. And actually, I don't know if we've talked about this or not, but food, maybe you were talking about it one of the episodes. Or maybe not, but where they have to chew and spit food out all the time. Maybe I read this somewhere else. But a lot of time in scenes, because they have to do it 5 or 6 times, maybe more, they're chewing food and then spitting it out because otherwise they would be so full. It
is definitely like it's a very tricky thing when they're doing a food scene. I know there's like this scene in Firefly where Nathan Fillion bites into this big tomato and they just had to like do it so many times, and it's like a very obvious bite. There's also, you can find on YouTube, I believe, a super cut of every time that Brad Pitt is eating in a movie. Apparently this is like a thing. He loves to eat. Yes.
But he spits it all out. And they've actually interviewed him about it. And he said, yeah, I eat, but, I chew it for a little bit and then I spit it out. And yeah, he's famous for it. And he said, if I swallowed everything I eat, he said I'd be huge, plus I'd be full and I couldn't do the scene. Anyway, so that's the thing. But getting back to coffee, it's like, do you really think that we are not seeing this? Everybody has had a coffee cup, even if you don't drink coffee. You've had hot chocolate or you've had tea or something in a coffee cup, and you know what it looks like when you're carrying it. You have to hold it a certain way, first of all, so it doesn't spill all over you because there's a hole. And they never do that. And they'll gesticulate with their hands when they have coffee. You can't move your arms like that when you have a full coffee cup in your hand. And this is another scene like that. And we just spent 5 minutes on this, but it's a
talking about
sticking point for me. Yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine in TV shows. So I'm glad you brought it up.
All right, so now we get to the Lorelai and Suki scene where we kind of talk a little bit more about why Lorelai isn't sure about dating Max. And she makes a really good point. They both make some good points, but Lorelai's good point is that she, in general, is a little bit wary of not necessarily dating itself, but of allowing Rory to be aware of her dating because she doesn't want Rory to get attached to someone just for Lorelai to dump him for, potentially relatively shallow reasons or just for any reason. And I think that's a good impulse to have, and it's probably something that she had to figure out pretty early on.
Yeah.
Because she has been single for most of Rory's life, and she was, she was 16 when she had her. So I think the fact that Rory is as stable as she is probably shows us that, like, Lorelai has been very protective and private about her personal life, because otherwise that would be a huge source of instability for Rory growing up, having people coming in and out. And the fact that Max is Rory's teacher means that, to a certain extent, she couldn't keep that entirely from Rory. He's already in Rory's life. Although Suki also sort of implies a good point, which is she asks if Lorelai has told Rory about this yet, and Lorelai says no. And Suki says, whoops, implying that it's a mistake not to tell Rory. And I agree. I do think that Lorelai probably should have told Rory that he asked her out pretty much as soon as it happened, to be honest.
Yeah. Not only should she have told her, she should have asked her if it was okay. And ordinarily, I would say, by the time you have a child who is a teenager, and I went through the same thing. I didn't date for a very long time. It wasn't even a choice, really. I mean, when you are a single parent, and she's only got one child, but I had two, and it's time consuming, and sometimes I worked a second job, so there weren't really a lot of opportunities to date. So I could see, but once they get to be a teenager, you might consider dating again. So she's kind of confronting this for the first time, but she's also dealing with a teenager who is aware and smart and is not going to be easily fooled. So the first thing she should have done was talk to her about it and say, are you okay with this? And if not, should I stop? And if you don't want me to date him, or if it's okay if I date him, how do we make this work? That seems so obvious to me, but things that are obvious to you and me and Suki are not always obvious to Lorelai.
And also, it's a TV show, and they need to have some conflict.
They gotta have conflict. But in this scene too, I love this scene. Do you want to talk about it or?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the other thing that's happening in this scene is that Luke walks away. They're at Luke's diner. He walks away from the counter, and Suki, like, almost immediately jumps behind the counter. It would be one thing if she actually did just jump behind there and grab the, like, paprika that she wanted for herself. But
no,
instead
the onions. She went for
the
onions.
Well, she tells him that she was looking for paprika, so maybe she was already looking for multiple things. But she immediately, like, gives this dude his sandwich, and she added lemon and pepper to it. She tells him, you're gonna plot, and he does not look amused, this random other customer. Like,
not look happy.
He wanted that. That's not what he ordered. But yeah, so she's, like, doing all of this stuff immediately behind the counter, and we're kind of setting up, I guess, a kind of rivalry between Suki and Luke, which, to be honest, I don't remember if they keep going with this.
No, I don't think they do. But I think it's a visual setup too, because I think there's a trope, I guess. Is somebody standing behind a counter and somebody sitting at a counter, so like in a bar or at a diner. The person standing behind the counter is positioned to be the person of wisdom handing out advice. And the person sitting at the counter or the bar is the one seeking advice, seeking, help, assistance, support. And in this situation, and often it's Luke and Lorelai at this particular counter, and Luke does give her good advice that she doesn't always take. But in this situation, it's Suki who realizes where she's at some point and kind of stands still. Suki very rarely stands still. So she stops and actually starts listening to what Lorelai's saying. And this is the third sexual reference.
Yes.
And I don't remember what the statement is, but she's basically saying, go ahead.
So she doesn't say the word, but she says, also, it would be nice to get...
Right, to get sex. And Suki's like, to get what?
To get
and
what?
She says, And she says, no, I don't know. She says, he knows. And she points to the guy next to him who Suki had given the hamburger to and put stuff on. Yeah. And he's got this actor is great. Because when she gave him the hamburger, he just kind of looked at her with this. Was it a turkey sandwich?
It's a turkey sandwich. She added the lemon and pepper to the turkey sandwich, but it doesn't.
Oh, I don't remember. Anyway. But anyway, the guy sitting next to her has this long, somber face.
Yes.
He never breaks a smile in the two times that and the camera there's a close up of him. So and this is the second close up where you see him, and she says Suki keeps insisting that she doesn't know what Lorelai's saying, and I don't know if it's because she wants her to say the word sex, or it's because she really doesn't know.
I think she really doesn't know.
Oh, okay.
I think there's a couple of times where we play up Suki as being a little naive, and this is one of those times.
Okay. Well, so she keeps saying, "You know." No, I don't. And she says, "You know." And then she points to the guy next to him and she says, "He knows." And the camera looks at him. He says, "Yeah, I know." So, because she's been listening to this. Again, this is the second time in the episode, let's point this out, that somebody off camera has been listening to the dialogue between two people and makes a commentary on it. And you didn't even see them until that point, but you realize that they've been listening. So,
Which occurs to me, maybe that is kind of an intentional stylistic choice because this is a town episode and it's kind of about the whole community to a certain degree.
And Lorelai often has conversations with people that you wonder sometimes, is there nobody else around listening to this? Because they're getting kind of loud. So,
and these conversations.
Yeah, these private conversations, other people are overhearing them, and I think that was their way of telling us that. So,
Luke comes out and immediately screams at Suki and rushes her out of the kitchen and tells Lorelai that if she brings Suki in there again, she better have her on a leash.
Yes. And something else Suki does in addition to the hamburger stuff and then the open-faced turkey sandwich, before she does those two things, she takes a couple of plates of food and garnishes them. That was the first thing she did, and I wrote that down because I thought, just like a chef as opposed to a guy running a diner, to put garnishes on plates that people are already eating off of.
Yes.
So she adds garnishes.
It is, I will say, I kind of wish that Luke hadn't yelled at her so much, but I guess we are supposed to assume that this has maybe happened multiple times, so maybe
I'm guessing, yes,
overreacted. Yes. It just seems like a little bit of an overreaction from him, but he is a grumpy guy.
And it's his restaurant.
It is his restaurant. I mean, I'm not saying that Suki should have done it. I just think that he could have maybe handled it a little more gracefully.
He could have, yes.
But I do like this, and again, I don't think that they keep going with this because I don't really remember this later on, but I do think it's a really interesting contrast that Luke and Suki do a very similar job, but they do it in very different ways. Suki is very much like a high-end, complex chef, and Luke is kind of the quote-unquote working class version of that, although ironically Luke owns his own establishment and Suki works for someone else. So the class dynamics at play are kind of interesting because she's doing the quote-unquote high-end version, but there's every chance that he makes more money than she does because he owns the business and she does not own the business that she works at.
I think also this scene shows us that Suki really does not understand or get food boundaries. And the counter space at Luke's diner is a sacred space to him. You don't get behind the counter. And actually, I think that's true of diners. You do not get behind the counter. And most diners don't have an open, the only way you can get behind the counter is through the kitchen. So in this instance, there just happens to be an opening at the end because they need it, because Lorelai sometimes it goes behind the counter in later episodes just to get coffee or to help or whatever. But the counter is a dividing line, and Suki has gone beyond that and walked into his sacred space because she doesn't get food boundaries. And then and it's not just the counter, but the people putting the garnishes on, and adding salt to somebody. She just doesn't she doesn't get food boundaries like other people don't get other kinds of boundaries. That's her thing.
I think she's also very used to just being automatically treated as the expert when it comes to food because she is in her kitchen. She is brilliant with food. This is an established fact about her character. So it just doesn't occur to her that there is a time and a place and it's not this.
One final comment on this scene, because I think it is an exception. Both Suki and Lorelai actually take bites of their burgers. And we do not always see them eat the food that they are served. And in fact, we did see them eating at grandmother's house, and I'm trying to think. I think they both took a bite there too. It's unusual. We've talk about a lot about the obsession with food in this series as a whole, and yet often we do not actually see them eat the food that they are served, but they did in this scene.
All right, so then Rory enters the scene with kind of the real crux of the episode, which is she tells them that there's an emergency basically about Cinnamon. She doesn't actually tell them that she's died, but she's like, Mom, you've got to come, it's Cinnamon. And then they show up at Babette and Maury's house, and Cinnamon has in fact died. And then Maury gets what is maybe my favorite line of the episode. Like, Rory walks past him and he looks up at her and he goes, "This is life, Rory. It breaks your heart."
I have that one written down too. It's a great line. And it's absolutely true. Life does break your heart.
And I think it's also like, up until that moment, for me at least, it feels like Babette is way more the like active person of the two and has so far shown us way more involvement in Cinnamon, but it's just this really like subtle, sweet moment where you see that like Maury very much was as attached to this cat as Babette was, and he's devastated by her loss.
Yeah. Maury is an interesting character. We don't really see him a lot in the series.
Yeah.
But he's a very interesting background character. We know him, I guess, mostly through what Babette says about him and how he, the effect his music has on her and how he makes her feel. But in this episode, and this may be the only one, we really get a feel that for this guy, he's an artistic, poetic soul. Yeah. And she's found the right person for her, even if he is 2 feet taller than her.
And the story, and the story of the cat is like classically both very sad and kind of comical. Babette didn't realize the cat had died, so she had stopped moving, and she ended up accidentally knocking her onto the floor, and I guess they had just waxed the floors or something.
So the cat slid across the floor.
Shot across the room, and Babette says, "When she knocked over the lamp and still didn't move, I knew it was over," which is both very sad and kind of funny. Maury feels bad because he's afraid that eating the clams might have been what killed the cat, and he's the one who let her eat. But the vet claims that it was not that. In human years, this cat was 260 years old, which I did some quick math, and 260, if we're going by 1 cat year equals 7 human years, then that would mean that this cat was 37 years old.
Yeah, I don't think.
Which, I believe the oldest recorded cat was 30 years old.
Wow, so really?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely at the long end. It's much more average to be like 16 to 20. I think 20 is like roughly more normal. But yes, the longest lived cat, I believe, was 30. So 260, either that is incorrect, or this cat was a mythical beast with incredible long life. But basically she died of old age. And then it's time for the wake, and then we get Michel showing up, and he is appalled to discover that this is a wake for a cat. This actually does bring up one question that I have, which is, does Michel live in the town? He must.
That's a good question. We don't know where Michel lives.
We don't know.
Does he live in the inn?
That seems unlikely, just because you would think they would mention that if like Michel lived in the inn. And it like Suki and Lorelai both very much live in the town and like are a part of the town's like community. Michel is not, which doesn't not make sense because he is such an ornery guy that it like, so it would make a certain amount of sense if he just like if he did live there, but he just wasn't involved, or maybe he lives like in the middle of nowhere. But this is one of the times when I wonder, in episodes like this, you do get a real sense for who's in the town. Suki and Lorelai are definitely a part of the town community, so why wouldn't Michel be? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And he certainly doesn't, the town sensibility is one he doesn't share either. Yeah. Of supporting one another, even if it's just a cat that's died. It's a very precious and important cat. And this community takes those kinds of relationships seriously.
And that's part of what this episode is about, is the community coming together during this time. But he's appalled to discover that it's a wake for the cat. He says, they lick their privates, these cats.
Yeah, it's disgusting. When he says it like that, it's like, yeah, cats can be disgusting.
But all animals are
But what he's missing, the point that he's missing, is that the cat was important to Babette and Maury. He, it's like a
Yes.
child to them. So this is a huge loss.
And according to Lorelai, she was Cinnamon is the cat's name. She was important to the whole town. She was like a little bit of a celebrity, which I totally get because people love animals. And like we have a neighborhood cat over here who like everyone is kind of aware of because he just wanders through people's yards and he's very friendly. And he'll just come up and ask for pets. And among my friend group as well, we're all like obsessed with each other's pets.
Cinnamon was taken on rides through the town in the little carriage thing. So everybody knew Cinnamon. And I also get the feeling that it's kind of just any excuse to get together too. So, people bring food and both Luke and actually that's the next scene. Luke and Suki both bring food. And the difference in them could not be more pronounced in this scene. And they're competitive to try and get in the door first. She beats him in. But then there's the real restaurant versus the diner. Lorelai asks Suki, how are we doing this? So she rambles on for about 10-15 seconds on, well, we're going to put this here and that here and then here and then the cutlery, and there's the order of how you lay the food out. And Luke walks in and just throws it down and tells everybody to dig in. Yep. So there's a very big difference for them. And I don't know if I'm probably getting ahead here, but there's another visual gag going on in this whole scene in their house. And that is that all the doors are so freaking short. And I mean short. Because, everybody in the town except Babette is tall. Maury is at least 2 feet taller than her. And it makes me wonder if they actually add to that, because I don't think Sally Struthers is. And we should point out here that Babette is played by the famous and wonderful Sally Struthers.
Sally Struthers, who is doing an incredible performance in this episode.
Oh, she really shines in this episode.
Yeah.
She's short. I don't remember her being that short when she was in All in the Family, but she is short. And Maury's tall, but I don't think he's 2 feet taller than her. I think they've done some adjustment, with something to make it seem like he's much taller than her. But everybody else, everybody in the town except Babette has to scrunch down to get through the doors.
And she makes a comment about how Maury got like a couple of concussions when he first moved in.
Yes, when he first moved in. And you see that in a scene in particular at the kitchen sink with Lorelai, where she has to sit down on a stool to rinse some dishes. And that's the next. Oh, wait, am I getting ahead here?
Yeah, you're getting ahead a little bit.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I do feel like the implication is that they might have, Babette maybe had this house custom made for her or something.
I'm guessing she had to have.
But yeah, so we get the Luke and Suki bit, and then Dean shows up and tries to talk to Rory, but Rory again kind of awkwardly avoids him. But then, or she doesn't avoid him, but she kind of like, I don't remember exactly what happens, but it doesn't go well, and he decides to leave. But as he's leaving, she kind of follows him out onto the porch. She doesn't say anything, so he keeps going, but you can kind of see on her face that she's regretting.
She wants to.
Yeah, not figuring out how to talk to him. And then she sees Mr. Medina over at their house. And apparently Lorelai has still not told her that they were going to go on a date. So Lorelai comes out and finds Rory seeing Mr. Medina, and Rory's like, why is Mr. Medina there? Am I in trouble? And Lorelai very reluctantly tells her, no, you're not in trouble. Max is here to pick me up. But then she has to go over and talk to him before they can really, talk that out. So she goes over to talk to Max and tells him that she has to reschedule because her neighbor's cat died and they're having a wake, and he kind of understandably thinks this is just her way of blowing him off.
Yep.
So his response is basically, hey, if I'm pushing you into something you don't want to do, then let's just not. I don't want to make you go out with me if that's not
Which doesn't make any sense, because he was so intent on talking her into this that at the first instance of something that, I mean, who would make up a story like that? Why does he suddenly think she's making up a story? And
I think it makes sense to a certain degree, and I actually kind of appreciate it. I actually think there's sort of a parallel between him and Dean in this episode, because they're both kind of pursuing two women who who appear to be resisting in some way. In Lorelai's case, she's actually resisting. In Rory's case, she's not resisting. She just doesn't know how to speak out loud when Dean is around.
Yeah, and the other thing about both Max and Dean is that they exist outside of the town culture somewhat. So Max completely because he lives somewhere else, and Dean because he's new to town, and so they probably both don't really understand why are we having a funeral for a cat and why is everybody in the community here. Dean doesn't understand that, and Max doesn't believe it.
I mean, I don't know how much Dean does show up to the wake.
He does. He delivers. Yeah. He's delivering something.
He is definitely a little bit of an outsider still, for sure. I do think that it's worth noting that at this time, I feel like if this were happening today, there would be much less confusion about it because a lot of millennials really do put a lot of emphasis on our pets and spend a lot of money on them and, treat them like they're important. I do feel like during this time period that really was not as true. So I think at this time period it was especially odd to have a wake for the town. But like we've said, a wake for the cat. But like we've said, while it is about the cat, it's also just about community.
It is. And I think they build up to it. I think that when I saw this episode originally, it did not seem outlandish to me because they have built up to this point with the closeness of the community and everybody who takes care of each other. But also the cat in the episode has shown up several times with them walking it through the town. Everybody knew it. Everybody knows Babette. She, do we know what Babette does for a living, by the way?
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do. Or Maury. No. But anyway, so I think we've built up enough to the quirkiness, even though it's just episode 5, the quirkiness of the town and the characters, that it didn't seem that out of the question or out of the ordinary for this particular context for me. But you can see where it would for Max.
I think also, again, the characters' performances really ground it, which we should get to in a second. But just like before we zoom past it, we get Kirk's name said out loud, I believe for the first time. Miss Patty calls him Kirk the Jerk. And he actually, he comes up to her during the party to explain that the owner of the store told him that he was wrong to castigate her earlier and that he should never do it again because she's a great customer and so she's allowed to eat whatever she wants. And he's like trying to apologize, and Miss Patty delivers an excellent line read. Stop sweating and close your pores, Kirky. I always forgive. Once.
Yeah.
Just underline.
Yes. Well, and Kirk actually, that's probably the first time we see him as a vulnerable, real kind of person, too. Because up to this point, the actor we have seen in almost every episode doing some other kind of character, or maybe it was always Kirk, but doing something weird every time and always very not in a likable way. He's never been likable. In this moment, he's actually, for the first time, kind of likable. So we have a little bit of foreshadowing that he's going to become a more likable character as we go on. But before we leave this scene, we have to talk about number 4 at the kitchen sink. Babette and Lorelai.
That's next.
Is it next? Okay. So can I go ahead?
Okay. Hold on. Just one quick thought that I had, which is I wonder if when they originally came up with the show, if they were never going to have the owner of the store show up, because it feels like this scene, it feels like we've written around the owner actually being there. And like, minor spoiler, the owner is Taylor Dozy, who later becomes a pretty big character in the town.
Who is it?
Taylor Dozy. That's the guy who owns the store. He is the owner of the grocery store, but he has not shown up yet. And it feels like this exchange between them, the owner is like a non-character who's maybe never going to show up himself. Even though at this point multiple other characters work for him, at least in some degree. Dean and Kirk both work at the store. So I'm just wondering if maybe originally Taylor Dozy was not going to be a character and that changed later on. I mean, we can't really talk about it that much because he hasn't shown up yet, but he will show up.
Just like Kirk. It's some of these characters I think kind of evolve. They see how well they fit into the storylines and give them more time. Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder if maybe Taylor shows up later to fill a specific role or something. We'll see. But anyway, now we have the scene at the sink. So go ahead.
So Babette and Lorelai are talking about the situation with the teacher and Rory, and they talk about quite a few things. But Babette reminds her that someday Rory will be gone. So yes. Lorelai needs to have a life. And yes. And in that moment, I think Lorelai realizes that everything, and we're only at episode 5, mind you. We've got 6.5 more seasons. But this is the beginning, she realizes, the beginning of her, not estrangement really, but of her relationship with Rory changing. Because Rory's growing up, and Lorelai needs to build a life for herself. So a light bulb kind of goes off. She thanks Babette, and Babette says, well, let me know when it gets to the point where, and I don't remember how she says it, but basically she's saying, when you have sex with him, let me know. And the line that she comes back with, I'll call you during the cigarette.
Yes.
And I'm like, at that point, I had to pause the episode and laugh hysterically because, first of all, there's just been so many sexual innuendos in this episode that really, and the Gilmore Girls is not known for this. It's not something that happens throughout the show, but in this episode, it's happened over and over again, and it's a great line. And it only is a line that would probably not work with anybody other than Babette. So, but it's a great scene. Anyway, go ahead.
I think she says something like she saw that man who was over on his porch, asks who he is, and Lorelai kind of explains. And I think she just straight up asks her, "But how is he in the sack?"
Yeah, that's
like, well, I don't know.
I don't know yet.
They also have this exchange that I kind of wanted to bring up and sort of discuss because it's just so telling of how women are taught to view themselves. She says she's talking about Maury because one of the things that's happening in this scene is that Babette is afraid that losing Cinnamon is going to ruin her relationship with Maury.
Right.
And she says, before Maury, I never thought that a man would ever want me. And Lorelai says, oh, I know how that feels. And Babette's response is, oh, please, with that ass, give me a break. But Lorelai explains, well, I mean, want all of me, not just my ass.
Yes.
Which is it's a very, like, touching scene between the two of them. But I also feel like there's just a little touch of, like, you're both gorgeous and wonderful. Neither of you should ever have to worry that no one's going to want you. You both
and yet
have
women
to offer.
do. Women do. They worry, but they have to be perfect. It's kind of like jobs. When women and men apply for jobs, women are always worried. They don't apply for jobs a lot of times if they don't meet 100% of the criteria. And men will apply for jobs they meet 10% of the criteria. Women always think that they're not good enough, that, no matter, I'm not perfect in 100% of the ways that I should be perfect. So of course men aren't going to be interested in me. And Lorelai has a lot of baggage. I mean, she has struggled with relationships, and she doesn't have a good one with her parents. I mean, and that having a good relationship with your parents can actually inform whether or not you have a good relationship in a marriage. Now, she's never been married, but she has had relationships. So she knows she's a handful. And doesn't matter that she's beautiful or cute or sexy. She knows that that's just what she looks like. It's not who she is. And will they like who I am?
And will they be okay with the fact that I have a teenage daughter?
Yep.
Despite being relatively young.
And that I had a teenage daughter at 16, which is not something a lot of women who are, middle class and educated do or talk about having done.
Oh, also this little exchange started off with Babette pulling medications for the cat to throw away.
Oh, that's a great scene too.
This is a good moment to bring up my PSA, which is you should actually be very careful when you are getting rid of medications and maybe look up and see if your local government has a place for you to drop off expired or not expired medications, because it's not actually a great idea to toss them in a landfill. Anyway.
No, it's not. Although most of them, if you don't toss them, the pills into the bag, if you keep them in the bag, they might be, in the pill case. But yeah, a lot of police departments will have 24/7. You can go in and drop in, no questions asked, drop in your pills.
In Seattle, there is an Indian cultural center that accepts expired medications.
Because even though it's expired and shouldn't be used, it can go into the landfill, which means it can go into the water, groundwater.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
which is not a good thing. Well, that's our public service announcement for today.
Yes, that's our public service announcement for the day. And then also, Sally Struthers, the line that made me cry the most in this episode was when she said, "She was so tiny when I got her, she could sleep in my shoe."
Oh, that was adorable. Oh my
so
gosh,
cute.
Yeah.
And then the scene ends with Maury playing Cinnamon's song, and so
that was beautiful too. Yeah.
Lorelai and Babette return to the living room where everyone is kind of gathered around Maury's piano as he plays Cinnamon's song. And then we get Rory and Dean in the garden. I think Rory is like hanging out outside, possibly contemplating her own awkwardness. And then Dean shows up and tells her that he's gonna back off because it's clear to him from her behavior that she's not interested.
Which is very admirable of him.
Yes.
I mean, he's misinterpreting how awkward she is, or that she's being awkward, but it is very admirable that he is backing off. So
it is good, although I will say I did not really love the way that he followed her onto the bus earlier.
Yeah, it was stalker-like. That's a good point.
It was a little creepy, and just like as a woman who has been alone on a bus before, like that is definitely a danger area where sometimes you will look up and some creepy dude will just be staring at you. So I sort of wish he had gone about that a little bit differently, but I do appreciate that he is telling her that he's going to back off. Like, yes, thank you for listening to cues. However, he has misinterpreted her, and she jumps up and says, "No, wait, I am interested. I am interested." And he says, "You are?" And she says, "Yes, I gotta go." And then takes off
again.
She says
it and then she leaves. Yeah.
And then we get the kind of Lorelai and Rory emotional scene of the episode. I don't know. We should have a term for this. The moment in the episode when Lorelai and Rory come back together and actually get to hash out the thing that is happening for the two of them, which is that Lorelai is considering or is going to at least try to date Mr. Medina, and Lorelai approaches it by saying, "That man on the porch was your teacher," and Rory says, "Mom, I'm a little behind in school, but not so behind that I don't know who the teacher is."
Here's the thing about that, and this is what bothers me about her wanting to date or considering dating Rory's teacher. Won't it be weird? Won't it be hard for Rory when she's sitting in his class, listening to him lecture, thinking about her mom dating him, or even her mom having sex with him? So, I think it's not fair to Rory. I really think that Lorelai should at least say, I want to date you, but we're going to have to wait a year until Rory is no longer in your class. And, there's the whole sexual harassment thing, too, that it, in a way, is an issue here, because if Lorelai were to date Medina and they broke up, would he take it out on Rory and her grades?
That's a good question.
There's just so many issues here, so many ethical issues for me, that I think in the year 2000 should have been on the plate of the writers. It should have been on the horizon, but it wasn't. And they're not even they don't even get into the details. And I realize there's a lot going on in this episode, but that should be an important part of their discussion, is how are they going to deal with this,
Yeah, he kind of brushes past it. I mean, you can tell that Lorelai is concerned about it, but Max doesn't seem to be very concerned about it. And it is kind of, now that I am an adult who is, older than Lorelai is in this scene, I am just kind of like, would it have been that hard? Like, you don't even have to wait a whole calendar year. You have to wait a school year. It's a couple of months. Would it have been that hard?
But here's a question. What did you think when you saw this episode in 2000, when you were a teenager?
Gosh, I don't know that I really remember. I do remember that I always liked Max as a character, but I don't know that I really, I'm not sure that I really internalized what was happening in this episode.
Yeah, I don't think I liked it even when I saw it originally, because at this point I was the mother of a 12-year-old and who was dealing with young, attractive male teachers. Too young for me, but still the situation was just not comfortable for me. I remember, and I liked the actor. I liked the character, but I just Lorelai's involvement with her child's teacher rubbed me the wrong way even then. So
yeah, I mean, like, taken in the abstract, did I wonder what it would be like if you were dating one of my teachers? I do think I would have thought that it would be weird. Like,
yeah, thank you.
I did not. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would not have wanted you. I think I would have probably made a joke about, like, can you get me a good grade in this class? But ultimately, I don't think I would have wanted you to do it. No.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's just a really good point, and I don't think they really address it here. It is, after all, kind of a comedy. So anyway, next scene. So what? Should we go to the Emily scene, or?
Well, there's just a really cute little thing that kind of wraps up Babette and Maury for the episode, where Maury asks Babette to stay outside with him a little while so that they can look up at the Big Dipper. And
it's very sweet.
Very cute little romantic
but
scene. Babette and Maury for the best couple of this show.
and here's the thing, when his name, Maury, Rory, and Lorelai. Yes. Are they doing that deliberately, do you think?
I don't know. But I also noticed it with Luke and Suki. Also very
yeah. So you see these writers sitting around a table saying, let's come up with some names that will really make it hard for people to say them in the same sentence.
20 years from now, when people are trying to do a podcast, we'll just really mess them up.
Exactly.
But yeah, so the next scene is Emily calling. And yeah, so Emily calls. She claims that she has called a bunch of times during the day, but in the past couple of hours, and couldn't get a hold of them. But Lorelai says that they don't have any messages. And Emily responds, I don't leave messages. If I wanted to talk to a machine, I'd talk to my VCR. So last week we had to explain answering machines. VCRs.
I think everybody knows what a VCR is, but yeah.
VCRs just seem so old now. Like a DVD player seems slightly antiquated, but
you can still buy DVD players. I don't know that you can, but libraries have them.
Yeah, I was in the age of the internet, you can buy anything, but like, yeah, I think at this point a VCR is probably like more expensive to get than anything else because it's basically a collector's
DVD
item.
players are too. So we got our first DVD player, a high definition DVD player in the mid 80s. It was a $700 machine. That machine went down in price, probably to around $200, and I recently found that same machine on sale on Amazon for $700.
Oh my god!
Because they've gone back up because now they're like vintage. I don't know. It's crazy, but yeah. Wow. But VCRs, I think public service announcement number 2, most libraries have VCRs in if you have something you want to transfer.
Good to know. But yeah. So during this scene, so Emily's wants to know why she wasn't able to get a hold of her, and Rory can tell that that's where the conversation is going and tries to signal to Lorelai not to tell Emily where they've been. And Lorelai totally misses it and tells Emily that they were at a wake for a cat, which of course pisses Emily off because she wouldn't go to the funeral for her cousin, but she'll go to this wake for this cat, which of course we as the audience totally get because first of all, Lorelai knew this cat, saw this cat every day, and also she's clearly very close with their neighbors. And like we've already said, this was a community event. Emily wanted to pull Lorelai out of her own world and force her back into the world that she left.
Exactly. Yeah. She wanted to bring her back into her orbit, into her rich, Claudia's probably rich, her rich family thing. And the thing, what Emily still doesn't get, I don't know that she ever gets it, is that Lorelai's community, what's the name of the town? Something Hollow. Stars Hollow.
Stars Hollow.
Her community, her town is her family. It's her real family. And it's her chosen family, I should say. But before we get to that point, she actually says she has a great joke here because, Emily gets them too. What next? Are you going to go to a raccoon's wedding? Because she really doesn't get that it's not that it was a funeral it's not who the funeral was for. It's who the funeral affected. It's who the loss, the death affected. And with Claudia, not only does Lorelai not know Claudia, she doesn't know any of the people other than her mother who would be affected by Claudia's death, and she can tell that her mother isn't really affected by Claudia's death. So, but here's my question about this, because it never gets resolved. Why does Emily call? They go through this whole exchange, and then they hang up. and whatever it was that, whatever reason she had for calling, never gets stated.
She never
And I don't
says.
know, did they cut it off? They were running out of time or what? But why did she call?
I don't know. I mean, maybe she just wanted to share some gossip after the funeral or something.
Yeah, that could be.
But you're right. Yeah, they don't say. And that's kind of the end of the episode. We get one final comment on the teacher dating where Rory makes a joke about Lorelai keeping him out late so that he'll sleep through her oral exam next week.
Which brings me to another timeline continuity problem. So it must be Thursday because they had made their date for Thursday. And and she gets accused of missing Claudia's funeral for the Catholic, and we knew that the funeral for Claudia was going to be Thursday. We knew that the date was going to be Thursday. Okay, so can you keep him out late on Thursday? Is what Rory said. So is she talking about the next week, or have we missed a couple of days here?
I assume it must be the next week. I assume she means like next Thursday. Did
you have assignments a week and a day out like that, or is this something that maybe happens every Friday? I don't know, but to me it was a timeline question. They are lax and loose with days on this show.
Yeah, for sure. I will also say that apart from memory work, which we covered last week, I did not have oral exams.
Yeah,
like we had memory works where we literally just had to stand up and recite a poem, but apart from that we did not have oral exams except in like Italian, like in a foreign language class. You would sometimes
that makes sense,
a more loose oral exam.
So maybe it would be a big enough deal that they would know a week in advance, because an oral exam is pretty big.
Yeah, it could be. Also, I do think some private schools will literally have certain tests planned out like weeks to months in advance.
Yeah,
I mean,
even syllabus.
Yeah, we always knew when the big exams were coming up. So
okay, so maybe they did this more carefully than I thought.
I did have some teachers who gave a very specific syllabus at the beginning of the semester, and we knew exactly when each test was going to be. So yeah,
okay, so maybe she did know. And the other thing is that Sam Phillips did the music for this whole episode. I don't know if you noticed in the credits they said music by Sam Phillips, and usually you would get a few songs in an episode, but in this episode there's been a recurring sound throughout the show, and I had kind of clicked on it, but didn't really realize who the artist was because I don't know Sam Phillips' music. But it was apparently that's a she, I guess. Sam is a she. Is that right? Do you know?
I don't know
Sam
who
Phillips.
This is. No.
Well, I think she was a big person in the 2000s. Anyway, I thought you would know who Sam Phillips was. Anyway, so Sam Phillips done the music for this episode. Yeah, look him or her up. And there were 2 or 3, maybe 4 different songs that played in different parts of the episode. I'm trying to remember if they came up when the cat was being talked about, or when we were in a scene with Babette, or because they definitely had a feel. The music had a feel to it, that it was kind of sorrowful, but beautiful kind of thing.
Hold on, Sam Phillips singer. Okay, wait, yes, there is a female Sam Phillips who is a singer and musician.
Oh, she's older than I would have thought. She was born in 1962.
Okay, it looks like her birth name was Leslie Ann Phillips, but her stage name was Sam Phillips.
Huh. This says she's a Christian pop singer in the early 1980s under Leslie, her name Leslie. And then she's actually has a wiki for Gilmore Girls. Oh my God.
Yeah, she has also composed scores for Gilmore Girls,
and
Marvelous Miss Maisel, which I believe are all Amy Sherman Palladino shows.
Yep. How about that? Okay. So anyway, but there were 2 or 3 songs over the course of this episode that had a similar feel to them. And they were kind of soft and somber and soulful, that kind of thing. And I think they had to do with whenever the cat story came up. Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah, I think that's all I got. I think we covered all of my notes. So
yeah, we did. So
episode.
That, dear listeners, is all for today.
Yes, I'm Tessa Dare. You can find me at my website, TESSADAIR.com. That's tessadare.com, where you can sign up for my email list. Or you can follow me on Instagram at author.tess.adair or on Twitter at authortessadair, all one word.
And I am Beth Von Baron. You can find me on Instagram at STL_writer_Beth. This has been Where You Lead, our brilliant and fun podcast about the Gilmore Girls from the perspective of a mother and daughter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks. See you then.
Yep, see you then.